straw ban at its base level completely misses the point, is totally ableist, and is really just performative activism that really isn't going to make that much of a difference, and I want to talk about why today, so let's get into it. Yes, that's right, today we are talking about the straw ban. Whether or not you are in a disabled community, you probably have heard people talking about this because, you know, climate change, I think at the minute, is always in the news. Understandably, it should be, and the straw ban is kind of at the forefront, and I want to talk about why, not only for disabled people, but just in general, it really misses the point and is completely ableist. So what I'm going to do is quickly talk about what it is and what's been happening, and then I'm going to tell you why it's ableist for disabled folks, and then I'm going to tell you sort of other climate change facts that kind of prove that the straw ban isn't really going to make a big difference and why it shouldn't exist. So basically, the straw ban, for the most part, is worldwide, and different governments and countries are doing it in different ways, but they are basically looking to either reduce or completely eliminate the use of single-use plastic straws. You know, the ones I'm talking about, the ones that are bendy so that you can position them to drink. You've seen them everywhere. There are a lot of them. You use them at restaurants, you use them at home, you can buy them for your own personal use, etc, etc. And the somewhat of a myth, I guess, is that they are one of the leading causes of pollution in our oceans, you know, save the turtles, etc, etc. And that isn't really the case in the first place, but I want to talk about why the concept of banning them and making them unavailable, whether you want them or you don't, is ableist and actually really hurtful for disabled people. So what do I mean by that? Well, for one, think about whether you are disabled or not, whether you need to use a plastic straw, whether a plastic single-use straw is a part of your daily life or not. Try and think outside of your personal circumstances. Imagine for a moment that your hands, much like mine, struggle to grip little things or hold anything with any kind of weight. If your wrists are weak, like mine are, you can see they're thin, my hands are incredibly thin as well. You probably struggle to hold a cup or a mug or anything like that. You would struggle to bring a cup to your own mouth and feed or, you know, drink yourself. That would be very difficult for you. So obviously that is a big issue for a lot of disabled people. A lot of disabilities involve, one way or another, the fact that someone cannot hold a cup, either because they can't support the weight of it, because of a tremor. I also deal with that, which would result in spillage. You know, there are a lot of different reasons why somebody might not be able to hold a cup and drink themselves without the use of a plastic straw. So obviously this means for people with disabilities like that, if they were in a situation where they could have a cup on a table in front of them or a tray or whatever, and put a plastic straw into that cup, that would then give them the ability, assuming they can move their neck and head, of course, to then be able to drink and feed themselves independently, or have somebody hold a cup in front of them so that they can drink independently. Now, you're thinking, but Sam, you don't need a plastic single-use straw for that. There are all these alternatives. I've no doubt some of you have already started typing it down in the comments below. Oh, but what about metal straws? And what about wood, bamboo straws, silicone straws? There are numerous different types of straws, and I'm not here to deny that. But I'm here to tell you unequivocally, and let me tell you, when a disabled person tells you this, you should listen, whether it's me or anybody else. Single-use plastic straws are the only option for a lot of disabled people. And I'm going to go into a little bit of why, but I am also going to link a chart down in the description, as well as a source to the person that made that chart, whose name escapes me right now, but I'll be sure to put it down there or up on the screen, which shows all the different types of available straw that aren't single plastic use and why they are not necessarily usable for everybody. But first of all, one of the most important things about the single-use plastic straw is that it has the bendy bit, so that it can be positioned into a direction that you can reach it. Now, I have another picture here which shows that the concept of the single-use bendy straw was actually created to help disabled people be able to drink from a cup, because straws, I think prior to that, were rigid plastic and obviously not positionable, which means you would have to completely maneuver. If you think about you holding a cup with a rigid straw in it, I'm sure you've used one if you are non-disabled and have started using alternative kind of straws, you'll know that sometimes if you're lying down or sat at a certain angle, they can be a bit of a pain to use. So imagine if you're in a hospital bed or whatever, a plastic bendable straw is obviously incredibly useful. So one of the biggest things about single-use plastic straws is that they can bend, they are flexible, which is obviously incredibly useful for a lot of people with disabilities. And I've no doubt after saying that, some more of you are just ready to type in the comments again saying, well, there are alternatives that offer the bendiness. You know, I think silicone, sort of rubbery silicone straws can do that. But for one, I don't believe they're incredibly hygienic. I think they're quite hard to wash. I think that is true of all the different straws. Again, refer to the chart down in the description, you'll see what I'm talking about. But for 2, a lot of people can have silicone allergies or anything like that. Plus, if they hold any bacteria after being washed, just running hot water over them, isn't necessarily a way to wash them. Not only that, but not everybody has the ability to be able to fully wash a straw with one of those sort of straw brushes you can get. Not everybody can do that. So yeah, silicone bendy straws in terms of the bendiness and the flexibility as a alternative aren't necessarily the way to go. Now you might also think, well, not everybody needs a bendy straw, why can't they use a paper straw? Paper straws, as I'm sure you know, not only feel gross, and maybe we could get on board with the feeling gross and we could, to save the planet, we could do with that, but they are incredibly susceptible to breaking apart. They are a choking hazard. I struggle to swallow a wide array of foods personally. And if I get a bit of paper stuck in my throat, that could be a real choking hazard for me. There are many people who, can't swallow particularly well, have it well worse than I do. So a paper straw for them is completely not feasible. Now you might also be thinking, well, about metal straws. You see a lot of them. I think they've been one of the main alternatives that have sort of come about. But what should be blatantly obvious about that is that metal straws do not work in hot drinks. A lot of disabled people use straws to drink hot drinks because they can't hold a hot cup. It would be dangerous. They could drop it, they could tremor and spill it on themselves. But a metal straw is no good because obviously it heats up and it would burn the person's mouth. Now, I'm not going to go into every different alternative. Again, I will link the chart that you may well have seen if you've been involved in this discussion before, and you can see why all the different alternatives, when it comes down to it, a single-use plastic straw is the only option. So now, that's the personal use in your own home kind of covered. I want to talk about why the concept of restaurants keeping plastic straws but only behind a till specifically for just disabled people is actually quite damaging and a very dangerous idea. Now, there are 2 big issues that kind of come together in this one, in my opinion. And the first is that a waitress should not get to decide if you are disabled enough to need a straw. Now, that is not me slating waitresses in any way, shape or form. My girlfriend works in a bar and a restaurant. She is a waitress. I am not trying to say a waitress is not a good job, whatever. I'm saying a waitress is not a doctor. He or she should not be able to decide whether you are disabled enough to use a straw. I will try and put a link down in the description of a Twitter feed, although I believe this user's gone private, so it might not be doable, but I will try to put a Twitter feed I read recently where a waitress would not give a disabled person a straw because the waitress said that she did not look disabled. I could make an entire other video on invisible disabilities, and I am going to, but it should be obvious that waitresses should not get to decide if you are disabled enough. Not only that, but then I think if you don't look disabled and are using a plastic straw, people are undoubtedly going to make comments to you saying that you are killing the planet or whatever and you don't need the straw, when it's none of their business about your disability or anything else. Secondly, I don't think the waitresses should need to have that pressure put on them either, for their sake too. They shouldn't, I doubt there would be that many waitresses that would want to have to judge people's disabilities, that would want to have that pressure, if their manager has said to them, look, we've got plastic straws, but, it's bad for business, people don't like the plastic straws, don't give any, unless they're definitely disabled, you've got to be sure they're disabled. The waitresses and waiters should not have that pressure put on them. It is not their decision to make. It will make them feel crappy on top of the fact that they shouldn't be making that decision for somebody else. Anyway, another argument you probably hear is that disabled people could just bring their own plastic straws with them. An easy one to debunk. A, if a plastic straw ban comes into full force, they will not be purchasable anyway, even if you manage to grab, a box now. Eventually, time will go by that they are no longer available. B, the stigma that comes with that. If someone sees you using a plastic straw and you don't necessarily look disabled, again, back to the waitress issue, they're going to think you're a bad person. They might say something to you, it's unnecessary, it's uncalled for. I know numerous disabled people who already have a bag full of things they have to take out with them, including myself, for their disability, and adding a plastic straw, which could very easily become unhygienic or get anything on it in your bag, it's not necessary. I don't see why somebody should have to do it. You might think it's quite a simple thing, but honestly, if you could see my bag full of all the different things I need to take out just for my disability, which is quite standard, I don't have any kind of immune issues or anything like that, where you'd have to be very careful in the stuff you have in your bag. You certainly couldn't let a straw come into contact with other things like that. So obviously that is not a good reason or a good argument against a straw ban. I don't think disabled people should have to provide their own plastic straws. Plus, you don't always plan to go somewhere where you might need one, so you're not always going to have one with you. So I've given you a lot of problems with a plastic straw ban, and you might be sitting there thinking, well, it's easy to point out problems, we have to do something. And, here's the solution. We don't need a straw ban. That is the solution. Straws should be available at restaurants on the counter for people to take, and people should just be personally accountable. If you aren't disabled, if you care about the straw ban, if you're one of the advocates, if you're one of the outspoken people that would rather the straws were banned, just don't use plastic straws. You know, we ourselves can be personally accountable. We recycle or whatever, you know, we can choose to not pollute if we do not need to. I think disabled people should be allowed to use plastic straws, and if you see someone using a plastic straw in a restaurant, do not even consider or dare to talk to them and say that you think they are a bad person. You don't know if they're disabled. Even if they look normal, whatever that means, they could have an invisible disability. You have no idea what is going on in their life. So to me, the straw ban should not exist. Straws should be readily available. And now I'm going to talk to you about why the straw ban, even outside of ableism and, you know, trouble for disabilities, completely misses the point. So I'm not going to get too in-depth into this. I am not a climate change channel, I am a disability channel. But plastic straws, while they do account for pollution in the ocean, and while I'm not saying that people shouldn't be personally accountable, if you don't need them, don't use them, they, you know, account for nothing. I'm sure I read somewhere the other day that there are twice as many cigarettes butts in the ocean as there are straws. They have plastic in the filters. The filters are pretty much proven to give no real health benefit to smoking anyway. They contain plastic, they are terrible for the ocean, but obviously there's no way the cigarette companies are going to do anything about it. They have tried, if you can really say they've tried. I'll link an article down below talking about this so you can see what I mean. But, you know, twice as many cigarette butts as there are straws in the ocean, and there's supposed to be however many thousands of, you know, straws in the ocean, and cigarette butts are even worse. I mean, are we ever going to, you know, nobody needs to smoke cigarettes for medical reasons or otherwise. So if you're going to say that straws should be banned, please, I hope you also are campaigning for cigarettes to be banned, whether you smoke or not. They are terrible for the environment and obviously terrible for your health. So, you know, that's another huge thing that nobody's talking about, because obviously there's a lot of money in cigarettes. Businesses aren't pandering to you, making you think that cigarettes should be done away with. Furthermore, and maybe even more importantly, corporations, big corporations, are the reason that climate change is happening and the Earth is being destroyed. It's something like 100 companies are responsible for around 70% of pollution in the planet. Like ExxonMobil, you've got Chevron, you've got BP, all these huge companies polluting the Earth on a gastronomical scale. But they aren't going to do anything about it because profit, profit, profit. If you honestly want to campaign, if you have enjoyed campaigning for the straw ban, if you are passionate about climate change, you know, turn your sights onto these huge companies that are polluting the Earth in a big way to put money in their own pocket. The straw ban, while it feels empowering, I guess, is not going to make as big of a difference as it would if we could get huge companies to stop polluting. So I think I've said my piece, and I hope you understand where I'm coming from. Again, please, before you start typing in about alternative straws, I am exhausted of having this conversation with people, as are all of us in the disabled community. Check out the diagram that I probably put up earlier and that I'm going to put in the description below. The alternatives, for the most part, they may work for some of us, but they will not work for the entire disabled community, and thus they do not support a complete straw ban. Take that in. When disabled people tell you something is hurting them in relation to their disability, believe them. It's as simple as that. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Don't forget to hit subscribe. I try and post a disability related video every single week. Be sure to like this video so more people can see it and understand that the straw ban really isn't the best thing. And as always, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about this video. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, be sure to check out my social networks. They are at the end of this video, over this way, I think, and down in the description. I'll also have a video up in the cards and at the end of other disabled videos if you wish to check those out. Thanks so much for watching again, guys. I hope you have a great day. Bye!